Welcome to Betrayal Trauma Recovery. This is Anne. Do you feel like a switch flipped in your relationship and suddenly all the things your husband once adored about you are now the things he criticizes? We hear versions of the story in our community all the time. In today's episode, I'm joined by a member of our community, we're going to call her Chelsea, who shared how her husband was grooming and she couldn't see it, and how his true character unfolded over time. Because of course it wasn't obvious cruelty at first. At first he was charming, he praised her, and he had empathy. After years of confusion, she later realized that his blame was a form of control. As Chelsea explains it,
the biggest thing for me was all the things he had originally liked about me. He started to make comments about that in like a derogatory kind of way. I remember being emotionally distressed, but not really understanding why.
Chelsea is describing grooming. Not in the way people usually imagine it, but in the quiet ways praise, pity, and confusion are used to keep women questioning themselves instead of questioning what's happening. Grooming is emotional abuse that actually feels good when it's happening because you don't realize what their true intentions are. It's how he ends up using your good nature against you. In this episode, we walk through 3 common ways that narcissists groom victims. So that I can continue this important work of bringing these stories to light, please like and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to donate to support the cause, click the join button. As Chelsea shared her story, I noticed 3 things that her husband did to confuse her on almost a daily basis. And here's what's crazy. These patterns show up over and over. My narcissistic husband did those exact same 3 things. So I'm going to share what they are first in the context of my story, and then I want you to listen for these same patterns as Chelsea shares. Number 1, he gave me compliments early on that he later used to attack me. So at first he said, "I love how confident you are." And then later he said, "You're so full of yourself." When we first met, he said, "You're such a fun social person." And then later, he said I was inappropriate and embarrassing. Number 2, he used DARVO. DARVO means deny, attack, and then reverse the victim and offender role. This is when someone who is truly hurting you claims that you're hurting him. In my case, when I confronted him about saying really mean things to me, he claimed that I was being mean to him. Number 3, when we first met, he gave me a lot of sob stories that were intended to make me feel sorry for him, and it worked. Later, when the inappropriate behavior started to be obvious, he always had an excuse. So watch for these as our conversation unfolds. All right, Chelsea, let's get started. Welcome.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. BTR has helped me so much, so I'm just excited that I got to get on here and contribute as much as you have helped me.
Thank you. And you sharing your story will help other women. So it's an awesome circle of life.
The club we don't want to be in, but we are.
Exactly. So let's start from the beginning of your story. When you first met your husband, or maybe when you first got married, did you recognize his behaviors as abuse at first?
No, I definitely didn't. I guess everything's 2020 in hindsight, but at the time, I was a single mom of 2. As a lot of other stories go, it happened slowly, so I didn't really notice it at first.
Did you think something was wrong? When did you start recognizing like something's not quite right?
It was like a few months into dating. I guess the biggest thing for me was all the things he had originally complimented me about or liked about me. He started to make comments about that in like a derogatory kind of way. So I guess that's why I didn't recognize it as abuse. I remember being emotionally distressed, but not really understanding why.
So if like I'm just using this as an example, maybe he said, "You're so beautiful, I'm so attracted to you." And then later maybe he was like, "You're not attractive to me."
Yeah, basically. For a couple of examples, I was single and I have a really good co-parenting relationship with my ex-husband. I had the perfect situation for me, which was like I had my kids during the week and on the weekends. I had the best of both worlds in a way, and I'm a very like social butterfly, like life of the party kind of person, and I love to wear red lipstick. So when we were first dating, he would compliment like that I was so fun and like he liked how I did my makeup and then even like things about like how good of a mom I was. And then fast forward a few months, probably like 6 months is when it all like slowly started going downhill. And he did end up using that against me a lot. He started saying things like, "You have children at home. Why are you acting like this? And why do you wear makeup like that? It makes people think you're XYZ." And that's really how it started.
So, this is the first way narcissists groom victims, by giving us compliments. And we're so grateful to have someone see us, notice us, appreciate us, and then later they use those same things that they once complimented us about against us. So later they weaponize what they learn about us, and then they use the thing that they complimented us about against us later, which is such a betrayal. So many victims don't see any red flags before they get into a relationship or marriage because the grooming is so specific to us. They're very good at manipulating us to feel like they truly see and appreciate us in the beginning. And I don't know, maybe some of them know that's a vulnerability for us, and then they purposefully compliment us and then later weaponize it. So at the time, were you thinking, okay, once we're married, then he'll go back to realizing how great I am?
Yes and no. So what ended up happening was I ended up getting pregnant about a little less than a year of us dating. And that was a whole fiasco. That's a whole other story. But right before I got pregnant, I tried to cut it off. It took me years to realize it was abuse. So that definitely never like came into my mind. But it was so emotionally tumultuous that I was like, I can't do this anymore. The way he would degrade me or like the way fights would go, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. That abuse was already in play. That wasn't really any different than after we were married. But I tried to break up with him. I actually moved a couple hours away for a job, and I was like, okay, this is going to help me cut it off because it's really hard to cut things off with an abuser, whether you're married or not married. And to me, that was like my way of, even though emotionally I was having a hard time cutting it off because he would always come back around as they do. I was like, if we're physically not in the same place, this should be good. Well, he ended up coming to still visit me on the weekends, and these episodes still kept happening every time he was there. And then I ended up finding out I was pregnant. And in hindsight, I tell this story sometimes now. I have multiple kids, and this instance was like the only time I remember just like falling and sobbing on the floor. At the time, I just started this new job, like I was trying to start this new life, but it was more of that subconscious knowing what was really happening underneath all of it was abuse and how that was just going to make it so much worse. And it did.
So you got married because you were pregnant, essentially.
Basically, yeah, like, he ended up begging for me back and, like, wanted to make it work, and, of course, add a pregnancy in there, and you're already vulnerable, at least that's how it was for me, and it's like, "Okay, I really want this to work now." Like, I already have 2 other kids. I don't wanna have another kid and be a single mom, and at that point, I still really wanted to be with him, but I was, like, fighting that war with myself. So I just wanted to believe him when he said he wanted to make it work. So yeah, we ended up getting married. But even leading up to the wedding and our wedding, we eloped. Even our wedding night was just horrible.
A lot of people have horror honeymoon stories, wedding night stories. Ugh, that's so awful. I'm so sorry. So you're married, and so many victims of emotional and psychological abuse try to resist the abuse by trying to stop it through common marriage advice like loving, serving, forgiving, being more understanding, thinking that if they act differently, it will protect them from the abuse. It's a really common form of resistance to abuse. What was your experience with this type of resistance to the abuse?
So we ended up getting married after the baby was born. He was a few months old at the time because all this whole drama played out for a while before I ended up moving back. That's when I quit my job and left my career because I had a corporate career at that point to be with him and be a stay-at-home mom. And that's what I thought I wanted at the time.
Really quick, what's his job?
He's in the military.
Okay, so he's got a stable, respectable job.
Yes, and that was used against me all the time. But yeah, so I noticed that, like, even though, like I told you the story of 6 months into dating is when things turned, well, then things really turned once I was fully dependent on him. That's when things got even worse. At that point, we did some counseling and just like typical stuff, but It's crazy looking back on it now because I'm like, I don't know what I was thinking. I think I really was just going through the motions. I don't know any other way to describe it.
What did he seem like to the counselors? Did he seem like a really upstanding, good guy to the counselors?
Yeah, and even through the years, like he will admit that he has like quote unquote problems. It would always be like, yes, I have problems, but it's not me. Like, as ironic as that is.
Mm-hmm. They're your fault because you're not understanding and because you're not patient and because you're not forgiving or something.
He would always blame my childhood because he came from like a very well off family and I didn't. He would use that against me. Like, well, you're the one who has mental health issues. You're the one who has trauma. Like, it's clearly not me. The only issues I have is the cheating or the prostitutes. You are the one who is basically quote unquote crazy. And that was just really hard because I think in a way I believed it.
So, when did you recognize that this was abuse?
Not until probably the last 6 months to a year before I ended up leaving. I didn't realize it was actual abuse. This is something he would say too. So, like I said, I believed it, and he says that to this day. Like, I was abusive. I'm not an abuser.
I play tennis, but I'm not a tennis player.
Yeah, basically, he would even say to like the multiple marriage counselors we went to over the years, well, I used like the abusive one, but now we're equal. Now we're just toxic because we're equal. Like that really came into play the last couple years before I ended up leaving.
This is a catch-22 because they admit they're abusive and suddenly they're like the saint. Wow, this is a man who can really like be honest and stuff. An abuser would never admit that he's abusive. And so in that way, you're thrown under the bus because it's like, what's wrong with you? And then if they won't admit it and they just present as this really great guy, then they also were like, he's a great guy. It's lose lose. Either way, the woman isn't believed.
Yeah, when I was pregnant before we got married and I was going to therapy, and I wish they would call it for what it is. I remember telling her an incident where he had said something to me like, well, how do you live with yourself? And she was like, he said that? Like, that is not okay. She said stuff like that, but why didn't she just tell me that was abuse? Instead of telling me like that's not okay. Like, she was very like adamant about that. Like, I could see the conviction in what she said, but now in hindsight, I'm like, why didn't she just tell me I was being abused? At BTR, there's a lot of validation in group. Ever I would have a situation, the BTR coaches would tell me this is what's happening. That was very validating for me.
Yeah. That's what we do here at BTR. Validate.
Oh, for sure.
How did you find BTR?
The podcast.
So you start listening to the free Betrayal Trauma Recovery podcast. And then did you start attending Betrayal Trauma Recovery group sessions?
I'd binge listened to the podcast and I was like, oh, this is my life. I knew I needed something to help me. And so then I went to BTR Group. I tell everyone about BTR.
You mentioned it was really validating to attend Betrayal Trauma Recovery group sessions or BTR group sessions because the coaches were saying, this is abuse. And you found that to be really validating and helpful. Why do you think having a group of women who really understand what you're going through is so helpful for healing?
I think my first session, I don't even remember the incident that was happening, but I told one of the coaches what was happening and they were like, that's DARVO. And I'm like, I don't even know what that is. And then when she told me, I was like, oh my gosh, like my mind was like blown because I was like, this happens to me constantly. How did I never know there was a term for this? That gave me strength because they would label things.
So, this is the second way that narcissists groom their victims to deny that they're abusers, then to attack their victim, and then to claim that they are the victim. And there's an acronym for this, and it is DARVO. So, DARVO stands for deny, accuse, or attack, and then reverse the victim and offender roles. For example, prominent people who are accused of rape. Bill Cosby is a good example. Someone accuses him of rape. He denies that it happens. Then he attacks the victim and says, no, 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 she's just trying to get money. She's just trying to get attention. I'm the victim here because she's trying to ruin my life. So the victim offender role gets reversed. So again, deny, attack and then reverse the victim and offender role. This is the second grooming tactic of a narcissist that we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, so I remember that was in my first session, and I remember just being like, this happens to me like almost on a daily basis. This happens to me by his family. This happens to me by him. Like, I can't believe his word for this. I remember just that leaving that session being like, oh my gosh. Aside from the support, hearing everyone's stories was really impactful for me. Once I saw that the BTR coaches aren't really persuading you to do one thing or another, it's more about making your own decisions and deciding for yourself what you want to do or what's happening. And hearing other people's stories and realizing like I get to decide if I want to still be in this situation 5, 10, 20 years from now or not. That was very enlightening to me, hearing other people how long they had to go through it. Like, that was a real like wake up call for me.
I think that's one reason why women are afraid to attend a betrayal trauma recovery group session. They may be afraid that if they find out it's abuse or they acknowledge it's abuse, that someone's going to push them to make some kind of decision that they don't want to make. Like someone's going to push them down a path that they really don't want to go down. What would you say to women who are concerned about that?
From my experience, I remember just really seeing how people could find even that little bit of safety, even if they weren't ready to leave, or maybe don't want to leave at all, and knowing they could have support and validation that their feelings are valid, what they're going through is valid, and even just finding the strength to be able to stand up for themselves or self-care. Like, I always remember them asking like what our self-care was for the day, and I remember being like, I don't know, I don't ever do self-care, just stuff like that. Like, I think it's so important when you're in that situation. You're so like spun out trying to survive, like keep your head above water. It's like a breath of fresh air to be in a group where you're understood and validated, regardless if you are planning to leave or not.
We wanted to make sure it was safe for everyone, no matter where they are in their process and no matter what their goals are. At BTR, our goal is safety. We just want to help women feel validated and make their way to safety in whatever way that it looks like for them. So that's our goal here. From your perspective, why do you think it takes so long to understand that you're being abused? And maybe someone pointing it out to you. Why do you think it takes maybe someone saying, hey, yo, that's abuse, for victims to understand that they're being abused?
For me personally, the gaslighting or other manipulation involved for so long before you tell anyone, or maybe nobody knows this is what you're going through. For so long, you've been told by the abuser that it's you. So I wish I could tell more people, because anyone I talk to, their first thing is to always go to marriage counseling. And I'm like, marriage counseling was so detrimental for me, because it's like we talking about the infidelity or like the abuse and like everything, and somehow we end up talking about forgiveness and the 5 love languages.
That's so funny that you say that. Anytime I hear somebody talking about, well, his love language is this or my love language, I'm always like, ugh, throw that book in the garbage. I hate the 5 love languages.
That can end up being used as basically just that you're not giving me enough of this, so I treat you this way.
Yeah, this is my love language and I deserve it. Or I'm entitled to this because it's my love language. And of course, they're always going to say their love language is sex.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm just like, how did we start these sessions with this? And 5, 6, 8 weeks later, we're talking about how I need to forgive, or I need to put more positive bids into our marriage, or just any of these like marriage counseling things that I'm like, none of this got to the root of the problem.
It's nonsense when it comes to abuse. But the weird thing is, marriage counselors in general don't assess abuse first. They just literally go right into positive communication or let's do a date night every week. If it really was an abuse situation, there's no way you'd be telling somebody to go on a date with their abuser every week. It's literally crazy.
To me, it's like the opposite of safety. Like, you're asking me to be vulnerable and to forgive someone who has not shown me that they're a safe person.
Or trust someone who's completely untrustworthy.
Yeah. they end up using that against you because it's like, well, the marriage counselor said you need to work on this. Like, it's like they bring up this list of things the marriage counselor told you to do, and like they're not even working on whatever they told them to do.
Well, it's hard to tell them what to do because it's like, don't cheat. And they're like, well, I haven't cheated since I did last time, and I'm not going to do it again. So what else are you supposed to tell them? Like, that's it?
Have more positive communication or whatever. But yeah, I think that's what makes it go on for so long. It feels like levels of like a video game or something. Like you have to go through all these levels before you're like, okay, like I'm not dealing with this anymore. That's how it felt to me. He made it seem like that too. They just start begging you to try one more time or try something different. So it's like, how many levels do I need to go through before this isn't going to work?
That's part of grooming. It gives you hope that change might be possible, right? Or they're willing to work on it. So it's essentially just a grooming tool to hook you. Grooming is what is confusing all women about the abuse. There are these times where they, quote unquote, genuinely want to work on it. They'll go to therapy or they seem to understand. They have these moments of what looks like true introspection where they apologize. And I know how much I've hurt you, and I don't want to break our family up. And this is the most important thing to me in the world. All that is grooming, and grooming is abuse. I think people are seeing, like, okay, it was good and then it was bad. We were happy and he was nice and then it was awful. They're not recognizing that that nice part, that good part, that part that he's quote unquote understanding it or he's cherishing you is abuse too.
And this is my case. The abuser says it's like unintentional. So it's almost like I can't call that abuse because he's not doing it intentionally.
The intent of an abuser is not true peace. The intent of an abuser is control. The intent of an abuser is to get something. So, in that moment where he seems genuinely caring, he seems genuinely interested in you, he seems genuinely repentant, the difference is that there are strings attached. There is a goal there. It is goal oriented. So, in other words, he's super sweet and nice to you, and you're amazing and you're beautiful when he wants to have sex or he wants to get something from you, when he wants to exploit you. That's what makes it grooming. Once he gets that thing, the devaluing and the discarding happens because it was only goal oriented. Whereas true love is genuinely cherishing someone else, it's not goal oriented. So they would say, you're amazing and beautiful, regardless of whether or not they wanted to have sex with you, whether or not they wanted something. They'd just be like, wow, you're a delightful person. I really like being around you, with absolutely no goal. That's the difference. When you say they don't intend to hurt me or they don't intend to be abusive, a lot of people will be like, well, they don't know they're abusing me, so how can it be abuse? That's not what defines abuse. What defines abuse is that it's harmful to someone else. So they don't have to know what they're doing in order for it to be harmful to you. The abuse is the harm. If their intent is completely selfish and goal oriented, then it's going to be exploitative and it's going to be abusive. For example, their intent might be, I just don't want her to know the truth because if she found out the truth, she would kick me out of our apartment, let's say. And so the intent is not to get kicked out of the apartment. They're not thinking, I'm going to abuse her, ergo, I'm going to lie. The only thing they're thinking is, I don't want to get kicked out of the apartment. So their intent is to deceive so that they can maintain their entitlements, so that they can exploit you, so that they can maintain their status. None of that is ever thinking, oh, I'm going to abuse her on purpose. It's just wanting to protect themselves and exploit.
That was so good because that sounds like so many conversations I've had. And you said like getting kicked out of the apartment. What happens when that conversation is more like, I don't want to lose you? Because I think that one's really hard because then there's that implied value in us as their spouse.
In that case, I don't want to lose you. They don't know who you are. An abuser does not see his victim as a person, they see an apartment. All they see is a pile of things they want. So they see a pile of sex, someone who will cook for them. They don't actually see an individual that they're going to partner with and have an actual relationship with. So when they say, I don't want to lose you, what they're saying is, I don't want to lose this apartment. I don't want to lose sex. I don't want to lose someone that's going to vacuum the floor. I don't want to lose any money and having to pay you alimony or child support or anything. I don't want to lose the privilege of looking like a great guy at church and showing up on Sunday with my wife and kids. I don't want to lose my reputation. I don't want to lose all of these other things. My guess is if you really pressed this and said, what is it about me specifically that you don't want to lose? I don't really think they would be able to answer it. And I don't recommend people asking questions like that because they could come up with an amazing answer. The abuser's in a trench, they've dug it through their own viewpoint, and they're really entrenched in there. And we never want to give them a shovel to dig themselves any deeper into that trench. That's why I don't recommend asking questions like that, because they're either going to groom you more or they're going to abuse you in some way, devalue you in some way. Either way, it's abuse to you and it's an unsafe situation. But you would know if they valued you already. You would feel it. You would know if they really genuinely valued you, and it would be consistent over time. You would not have abuse and then grooming and then abuse and then grooming. You wouldn't feel like you were married to Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, that's what was hard for me for so long. I thought this vulnerable victim part of himself that he would show me was him. And then said getting the whole picture, all of parts of him are him. I felt bad that he suffered so much, that he had these issues. I'm sure that was grooming as well.
Yeah. Well, think about a good friend of yours who's been through really hard times. Like, she's kind, she's supportive, she validates you. She does not use her difficult story or her difficult upbringing as a weapon to abuse you or to excuse her mistreatment of you. She doesn't use it to try and get people to feel sorry for her. Her response to her trauma was post-traumatic growth, where she was like, you know what? I'm going to go to college. And she's this incredible, amazing person. There are so many people who have had very difficult situations in the past. They've had trauma in their childhood, and they don't abuse other people. They make really good choices. They think that is not the kind of life I want. So let's stop right here to point out this third way to recognize how a narcissist grooms victims. Number 3 is that they try to get people to feel sorry for them. They want to say, well, I was abused as a kid and my life was really hard. And so that's why I'm abusive, or that's why I act this way. And none of that is a reason. Think about yourself. You went through a very difficult situation and your maybe upbringing was bad. I'm just saying the general you. And do you lie and manipulate people? We just need to remember that all these sob stories, when they're told in this context, are only grooming. That's their only purpose. The purpose is to make people feel sorry for them so they can get away with bad behavior.
Yeah, for sure. And I was groomed very early on. I told you how it all started. Well, I would say a month or two, even before that, was when the grooming began in hindsight, where he started opening up about his childhood and stuff. So, or like things he had done in the past, like with his ex-wife that brought him so much shame and all this other stuff he said and cried and everything. And now I'm like, major red flag. But in hindsight, like that was clearly when the grooming began.
Exactly. Narcissists, they want to start out getting people to feel bad for them. So that's another thing for all the listeners, is that if you start the relationship feeling bad for them, then you can just stand up and get an Uber and go home. You don't want to start there. And also, if you show up on a date and that's what you lead with, I've been so victimized. I'm not talking for validation at BTR or any other situation. Any other situation with girlfriends, go for it. I'm talking about somebody that you're interested in as a date. That's dangerous because then they'll be like, oh, I can just tell them I'll never do that to you and I'll never leave you. So abstain from dating while you're feeling that vulnerable until you can get strong enough that you would never lead with that in a relationship.
I know that's true, but the way you worded it about someone starting off with that, because I think that happens actually a lot. And we don't realize that it's grooming even from day one.
A great way to start a date would be like, my life's great. I I love it. Get yourself to a place where you feel like I am whole, I'm doing really well. That is a good place to start dating from, rather than I'm trying to date to get someone to help me or I need something. I think that's just too vulnerable of a place for us, especially when we've been victimized so much that it just sets us up for more victimization.
Yeah, that's so good. I've done a lot of deep dives on my own story, over time, and I still have revelations like all the time about things I've been through.
Even now, like 7 years later, I'm still getting insights about like, why did I think that? Or this is what was really happening. I thought it was about this and it was about this totally other thing. There's insights that we have over time where we're like, oh, that conversation wasn't even about that. One of the things I've recognized is that my ex would get in a fight with me late at night and then he would leave the house because he was so mad that he just needed to cool down. Well, now I am 100% sure that that is not the reason he left. He did not leave because we were in a fight and he needed to cool down. He had something he wanted to do, maybe solicit a prostitute, maybe he's a voyeur, he looks in people's windows, something. I have no idea what that thing is. And he had to figure out a way of getting out of the house. So he picked a fight in order to have a quote unquote good excuse to leave. Now I know that that was the case, but in the moment, it really felt like we were having a legit fight. It felt like in the moment that was reality. And now I'm like, oh, that wasn't even a thing. Like we weren't even in a fight. There was nothing to fight about. He just manufactured that in order to be able to say, I need to go. So a lot of things like that women are experiencing where they think the reality is he's not attracted to me and he stomped out of the house. They don't know that he just was like, okay, I got to get out of the house. I'll just tell her she's a bad cook and she'll get mad at me and then I'll get to go.
Yeah, I feel like that definitely happened to me a few times. I don't know what he was doing, but that's a very good point.
Do you have anything else you want to share with women? Maybe this is their first time listening to the podcast and they're kind of like, oh, is this for me? This seems kind of extreme. I'm not sure if this is abuse.
I get like being hesitant because admitting this is a problem is almost like taking a huge step in itself. For me, like BTR Group, the BTR coaches were just so helpful. There were times where an incident would happen. I would have to wait a week to see my therapist. A lot of people don't even have a therapist, but like maybe your friends or family don't know what's going on, or like I didn't always want to be calling them every time something happened. So once I finally went to BTR, it was just such a relief to know like anytime there was an incident, I could get on the same day. And sometimes I wouldn't even need to talk about it. It was just like being in that space where I felt safe and not alone, because it's such an isolating experience to be going through this. Even just sitting and listening was so helpful because it made me not feel crazy. It made me not feel so alone.
Our community is incredible. And I always say, like, when one of us has an epiphany, all of us have an epiphany. When one of us gets to safety, it makes it better for everyone. We're all working on deliverance together. And together, we can make this world a safer place, starting with our own home and then spreading it out to other women across the globe. So I'm so grateful that you found us and grateful that you came on today to share your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.